right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of First Attack. And I'm going to be doing some... Look at this fanciness that we have here. Seriously, though, shout outs to Paul Kugler of Broken Tier, who made us these cool designs. So if you actually had a chance to go and check him out while he was designing them, it was really cool. So yeah, definitely huge shout outs to him. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, so today we're going to get right into it. What we're actually going to talk about today in First Attack, in today's episode of First Attack, is a topic that I think is very dangerous. It's actually something I kind of, to be honest with you, it's something I wanted to save for a little bit later. It's kind of a more advanced topic, but however, everything that I'm going to reference from this point forward, whether it's how to do combos, how to do frame traps, how to do all sorts of things, is all going to involve one concept that I feel like it's my responsibility to explain, and that is frames. Now, when you watch streams a lot, when you talk to a lot of pros and everything, you hear a lot of people talking about frame data. Frame data. What is frame data? And they always talk about, oh, this thing lasts for this many frames, this lasts for that many frames and such. So what I'm going to actually talk about, frames, and, like I said, it's kind of getting into a point where people... I got a question on Twitter, and the question was, how important is frame data? How much do I need to study frame data in order to be good? And that's actually something that I'm really worried about, is that because of all the talk about frames, and this is our fault too as commentators, when we're actually talking on streams, we're always like, oh, this move is -3, this move is -4, so this can punish, and all this stuff. So, one, a lot of people don't know what that means, and two, when you hear it, it just sounds like, oh my gosh, I really need to learn about all these frames in order to turn myself into a top player, so I need to learn what's -3 and what's, And so that's actually where the danger comes from, frames. So before I even get started in talking about frames, I actually really, really want to just kind of go over what the concept of frames are. Because actually, I don't think a lot of people quite understand exactly what frames are. So what exactly is a frame? Why do we keep talking about frames? Anybody who is, who loves animation, who's actually done animation before, knows what a frame is. So hang on, let's do this real quick. All right. And here we have a graphic of Ryu here. And he is standing here right now. Now, when you ask what a frame is quite simply put, it's just an animation frame. That's all it is. That's all it comes down to. So in other words, if I start going through this frame by frame here, you're going to see Ryu is animating. So just picture it kind of like a cartoon. You have to draw each frame one by one just to make sure it looks like that they're properly animating. And that's all a frame really is. It's nothing more complicated than that. So when people talk about frames, they're just talking about the actual animations of a character. Now, one important thing to note about frames, and this has actually changed a little bit since we've gone HD games, there are 60 frames per second. Back in the old days, in a lot of the old games like CVS2 and such, there was actually 30 frames per second. So a lot of games, I don't think were quite 60 frames. Don't quote me on that one. I'm not 100% sure exactly how that works. But nowadays, we are definitely counting 60 frames per second. So let's take a look at this stand jab from Ryu here. Right here, he's not doing anything. And if he starts to jab, we're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so it takes him about 13 frames of animation to run through that entire standing jab. And so this is where a lot of the frame, this is exactly where the frame data comes from. This is where people start extracting frame data. Now, you know, I wish I could just end it and be like, okay, this is it. This is frames. It's all very simple. But it gets a little more complicated because there's a lot of concepts tied to stages of animation frames. Now, with all moves in Street Fighter, all moves in almost every fighting game, there is a concept that comes with frames. And this is probably one of this. See, this part right here, you don't even have to know math. You don't have to count frames. You don't have to do anything. You just have to understand the concept of what frames are. There is 3 stages in every move. There's the startup, there's the active, and there's the recovery. Those are the 3 main stages of a move. And this actually becomes very important because a lot of times in many fighting games, there are only certain things that happen in startup, only certain things that happen during active, you know, concepts of buffering, concepts of media attacks, concepts of frame traps, all these high-level terms, you know, that players learn to do, you know, are based on these 3 different stages of a move. So once again, I want to remind everybody what those 3 stages are. We have startup, active, and recovery. So what are these? So if we actually look at Ryu's standing jab here, obviously there's a point in which the move can hit. And that is demonstrated here in this video by the red box. As soon as the red box appears, that means he can hit you. So that is where Ryu can actually attack and hit the opponent, whether they are blocking or they get hit by it. All of these frames where this red box exists, these are known as the active frames. So these active frames basically are describing when a move can actually hit. And so just by name itself, it becomes very obvious what the startup and recovery frames are. So like I said, there's startup frames, active frames, and recovery frames. The active frames are going to be all of the frames of animation before you reach your first active frame. So here we have Ryu. 1, 2, 3, 4. He has 4 startup frames. Now, this is actually one thing that I personally hate about frame data and the way that it's presented to a lot of people. And you could turn down your audio for a few seconds and seriously, like, don't listen to me about this because this is not very important at all. But most of the time when people talk about startup frame data, they include the first active frame. I would rather have it that Ryu's standing jab has 3 startup frames, but for some unknown reason, it was decided at some point that the proper description is that 4 frames is what they count the startup as. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first active frame is actually also a startup frame. That's the way we've decided to go. That's the way the entire community has gone. So that's going to be how it works. For a lot of people out there, you know, outside of this red hitbox here, they're probably also wondering, you know, what all these other boxes that are all over the place are for this character. You know, without trying to get into too much detail, the green outlined boxes that you see around Ryu, so these green boxes that you can actually see around his body, those are what you want to call the hurt boxes. There's hit boxes and hurt boxes. The red that you see here, this is the hit box. These green boxes are the hurt boxes. If your red hit box overlaps the opponent's green box, you've hit him. That's basically what That's all Street Fighter works. This is exactly how Street Fighter works. And, you know, you'll see this in the PS Vita version of Marvel when it comes out. They actually don't do boxes. They do circles in that game. But it's going to be the same concept. They have red circles and green circles. And that's how they detect hits. And for those people who are also wondering what this gigantic yellow box here is, here, I'll show you guys in just a second. If I switch over to, let's see here. If I switch over to this, basically what that yellow box actually determines here, what I'm going to do here is switch the second player here. Do I have him on? Yes, I have him on. So if you look while I'm crouching, if Ryu jabs, Cammy goes into a block animation here. Right? But there's something known as proximity blocking in this game that if I stand far away enough, you see how Cammy doesn't actually go into a block animation? So if I hold back and I start jabbing, you see Cammy starts blocking here. But if I let her go to a certain distance and start jabbing, she keeps walking backwards. That is exactly what this yellow box is, this large yellow box. This is the range. This is the essence of the move that will cause you to block. So if your characters, you can't really see it probably too well, but you'll see that Ryu is surrounded by a few blue purplish boxes here with the yellow colored inside. If these purple boxes here fall within the boundary of this longer yellow box, you will be affected by proximity blocking, and that will force you into block. If you're outside of it, then you can walk backwards without blocking. So that's what those other boxes are. But back to the concept of startup, active, and recovery. So with Ryu stand jab, we have 4 frames of startup, and then 1, 2, 3 frames of active, and then once the active frames go away, this is where you start your recovery frames. And here we go, Ryu is finishing his recovery. Boom, there you go. Now don't mistake this yellow box going away for when the move actually finishes recovering. The yellow box is actually not an indication of that at all, because if we go to something like standing strong here, you'll see that the yellow box goes away right away. So during the entire standing strong recovery, boop, 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 the character can walk freely. So this yellow box is not a determining factor at all of what is recovery or not. It just goes away whenever. So these are the 3 main fundamental concepts of all moves in this game. It doesn't matter if it's a special move. It doesn't matter if it's a super combo or if it's a normal move. They all have startup, they all have active frames, and they all have recovery. I mean, obviously there are going to be some moves like let's think about Vega's backflip. Doesn't hit. So there's really no such thing as it kind of blurs the line between startup, active, and recovery frames. But it does have startup frames and it does have recovery frames. And again, the reason this is significant will start cropping up in later games. But just to kind of give you a preview so it kind of makes sense, startup frames are, if you get hit during a startup frame, any frame before the first active frame, if you get hit during any of those frames, that is what gives you a counter hit. And so that's basically what's going to reward you with the counter hit. If you get hit out of an active frame or a recovery frame, that is not a counter hit. And obviously with some moves, they decided to make some exceptions. There are some moves that just say, you know what, it's a counter hit during this time and such and such. So Capcom is at liberty to change a lot of these things. Now, before I move on, so I'm going to take a quick break really quick, but when I come back, I'm going to start talking about frame data. I'm going to start talking about exactly what all those numbers mean and all that stuff like that and how they affect the game and, what kind of reason why people actually study this kind of data and how it's useful. So we will be right back in just a little bit. Man, that's amazing. All right, well, hey guys, welcome back once again to First Attack here. I am in the middle of talking about frames, and I actually, before I get started with the number of frames, I just kind of want to go over one little thing about Ryu here. There was, I'm sorry, hang on one second, let me get over to there. There was one change that was made to Ryu in between Super and AE that got reverted between AE and 2012. Now, a lot of people didn't quite understand what this means or what the significance are. And, you know, me and David have mentioned it a lot on streams. Like, oh, Ryu lost this many active frames, blah, blah, blah. And people are like, I don't understand what this means or what significance it makes. Well, if we actually look at Ryu here, when he does his crouching forward kick, like I said, let me rephrase that. When he does his crouching medium kick. Okay, I'm going to have to get used to this, okay? So I'm still used to the classic Street Fighter 2 nomenclature. But if Ryu does his crouching medium kick, you're going to see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames of startup. And on the 5th frame, it starts to hit. Now let's count how many active frames he has. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's it. So he has 5 active frames. Now keep in mind that this video that I'm showing you is from Super. So this is a really old video here. In AE, this would be out of date, but in 2012, it's correct. So what they actually did was they didn't change the length of Ryu's low forward kick at all. It is the exact same move, same amount of startup frames, except they took away these last 2 active frames. These last 2 active frames were turned into recovery frames. So you can think of it as Ryu losing 2 active frames but gaining 2 recovery frames. So the move was the exact same length the whole way through. He just actually lost these last 2 active frames. Now, people are going to ask, why is this so significant? Why would this even matter? Well, when Ryu plays footsie, when he throws out this move like this, it's significant because for those 2 frames, even though it's just 2 frames, and this is the one scary thing about Street Fighter, is that these little minute frames make a big difference. It's true in all fighting games. These frames make a huge difference. Even though it only lasts for 2 extra frames, these 2 extra frames are enough to make it so that it's harder to chase Ryu's low forward kick and gain an advantage on him. While if his low forward kick misses you, so watch here, let me do this really quick. Sorry guys, give me a second. So if I do this and come to here, if I'm doing low forward kick with Ryu like this, it's actually much harder to follow him in there because you have a higher chance of getting hit by those late frames like that. So that was a perfect example right there. I walked right into the end of that low forward kick. And even though it's just 2 frames, it's enough to kind of be a little more of a nuisance. It's really hard for me to control 2 joysticks right now, but it is something significant that you have to take a look at. And so that's why when this move got nerfed, a lot of Ryu players Ryu relies on low forward kick. It's his main poking tool. It's his main zoning tool. When it got nerfed like that, a lot of people actually considered Ryu dropping drastically in tiers just from that one change. And so that's basically what that change meant. Now, let's talk a little bit more about frame data here. Oops, let me do something really quick. Let's talk a little bit about frame data. When people start studying frame data and they start looking at what, these numbers, you start seeing all these crazy numbers. Like Here, I'm going to switch over to a web page really quick. You guys aren't going to be able to see it. I'm actually going to the Shoryuken Wiki, which actually has a bunch of frame data on moves. But, you know, you guys don't need to see these numbers. It's not that important. But, you know, for example, you'll see something like Far Jab has 4 frames of startup, 3 active frames, and 6 recovery frames. It's +2 on guard and +5 on hit. And you know, it's like you hear all this stuff and it's like, what the heck does all this stuff mean? Like, what is the significance of all this and why should I even care, right? So really, honestly, a lot of times when I'm talking, if you guys remember my very first episode, see, this is all ties back together, which is what's really cool about Street Fighter, is that everything fits in with each other so neatly and so snugly. That I talked about how Street Fighter is a dance, right? That, you know, it's basically 2 characters jockeying for position on the screen, trying to figure out how to, you know, get themselves into optimal positions. So they're walking like this. Now, let's theoretically say Cammy here is stuck for 5 frames. So remember I said that there are 60 frames per second. So Cammy is stuck for 5 frames. So she's literally stuck for, what is that, 1/12 of a second. If she's stuck for 1/12 of a second, it basically means Ryu has 5 frames to move before Cammy can. And that means I actually have 5 frames to do whatever I want before Cammy can do anything. This is where studying frame data comes in. So if we go back to the video where Ryu is crouching, let me go back to that one real quick. Sorry guys, I try to do this all as fast as I can. If we go back to this video with Ryu is crouching, and I'm gonna go find crouching strong here really quick. See, so this is crouching short, and this is crouching jab, and here is crouching strong. Okay, perfect. So what we have here is crouching strong. So when I'm sitting here talking about, you know, having a character stuck, you're gonna wonder what the heck I mean by that. Like, how can a character actually be stuck? And most of the time being, quote, stuck, unquote, is a result of hit stun and block stun. 2 very, very important concepts in all fighting games. Hit stun is the concept of when your character is hit, how long are they actually reeling for? So if I walk up here and punch Cammy in the face, the entire time that she is reeling is called a hit stun. If she's blocking and I make her block, the entire time she is blocking is counted as block stun. Now, the most obvious example of when an opponent is stuck is if I do a jump kick and I land. So if you notice something, do you see that? You see that right there. When I'm Ryu and I do jump roundhouse, you notice how early I can start walking backwards before Cammy leaves her animation? Like that? You saw that. Cammy was stuck in block stun for a little bit, and then Ryu started walking. That is the most glaringly obvious example of having the opponent stuck. So Cammy is stuck in block stun, and that entire time Ryu started walking before Cammy could move. That's all free. You have to picture that as a player. If you're Ryu, Cammy can't do anything. She's stuck in block stun. She can't jab, she can't jump, she can't uppercut. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here walking back and forth, and I can punch and I can kick and I can start my throws and I can do all sorts of fun stuff. This is what is known as frame advantage. This is exactly what we are talking about when you hear us talk about frame advantage. Whenever you hear someone say, this move gives you +2, that is exactly what it means. When an opponent is struck, for example, let me get the exact numbers here so I'm not actually giving you false numbers here. Crouching medium punch from Ryu is +2 on guard. So if Cammy's blocking and I do crouching strong, I have 2 frames that I can move before the opponent can. Now this doesn't sound like much. This actually sounds like big deal. He has 2 whole frames, you know, that's 1/30th of a second. How amazing is that? Well, let's take a look at this really quick. What I just did right there was crouching strong, crouching jab. Ryu's crouching jab has 3 frames of startup. So if you think about it, my low strong is +2. If I time my move perfectly, if I time my move absolutely perfectly and do low strong and the low jab has 3 frames of startup, but keep in mind I'm +2. So the first 2 frames of that jab, are covered by block stun, by my frame advantage. That means my opponent only has 1 frame before the jab hits them. So you can actually see where this makes a huge difference, especially because the fastest normal move in the game is 3 frames. So if I'm Ryu and I do low strong and the low jab, if I don't have an invincible move, I cannot do anything. Throws take 3 frames to start up. So if I block Ryu's low strong and try to throw afterwards, his jab is going to hit me first because of that 2 frames of advantage. That 2 frames of advantage was just enough to give me that. And so in this situation here, so that's kind of how it works on block stun. And then on hit stun, obviously we talked about when you hit the character, it gives you hit stun. Ryu's low strong is +5 on hit. So in other words, after I hit with low strong, I have 5 frames that I can move before Cammy can. So what does this mean? Why is this significant? Why is this important? Well, if you look at it, Ryu's crouching roundhouse has 4 frames of startup. So let's see if we can see that here. I would love to be able to show that to you guys here instead of just making you guys assume that. So I did, so let's take a look at this crouch strong here. So while I have it here, do I still have it or did I? Yeah, here we go. So crouch strong is going to come out. And when it hits, you notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Look how fast that move recovers. In general, hit stun from light attacks is 14 frames. Hit stun from medium attacks is 17 frames. Don't memorize these numbers. You guys will never need to use it. And hit stun from hard attacks are generally around 22 frames. But again, you guys don't really need to know that. Please don't sit there and memorize these numbers because that's not what I'm trying to tell you to do. But if you know that, just basic knowledge, if I know that a medium attack is generally 17 frames of hit stun, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, I'm done. So I just counted 12 frames of recovery. Now I have 5 extra frames of advantage. So when I go look at low roundhouse here, ooh, look at that, low roundhouse. Yeah. So when I look at low roundhouse here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it a 5 frame startup? I thought Ryu's low roundhouse was a 4 frame startup. Oh, it's 5 frame. My bad. Okay, so Ryu's low roundhouse is a 5 frame startup. So let's do a little math here. I really wanted to avoid doing math because math sucks. But you know what? No, math is cool, to be honest with you. But we don't want to do math here. So if you think about it then, low strong, which leaves you at a 5 frame advantage, and Ryu's low roundhouse has 5 frame startup. Hey, look at that. We match perfectly. And that is exactly why you can do... I'm not going to be able to do it on a laggy TV, but... Oh, she died. I'm in versus mode. That's right. I'm not in training mode. Okay. But this is exactly why low strong and the low roundhouse works as a combo. And not only does it work as a combo, but now you know it's a one-frame link. And this is exactly why it's a one-frame link. When you hear one-frame link, now you know exactly what that means. Get it? No. There it was. All right. So there you go. There was the 2 hits right there. So that's how link combos all work. They all work on frame advantage off of hits as opposed to frame advantage off of blocks. Now, Street Fighter is an unusual game in that hit stun and block stun are different lengths. I think Street Fighter 4 might be the first Street Fighter game where this is predominantly true. In all Street Fighter games, in fact, in almost all Capcom games, fighting games in general, hit stun and block stun had been almost the same length with a few exceptions here and there. And this is probably one of the first games where it's been a little bit different. So that's why the math gets a little wonky depending on block stun or hit stun. But that is basically, you know, showing you where some of this frame data can help. You know, if you find out a move, you know, I haven't talked about being minus. Ryu's low roundhouse kick here. I mean, oops, I am not showing the right thing. If I show you Ryu's low roundhouse kick here and I go into the recovery frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. There's a lot of recovery frames here. So if you know that there's a lot of recovery frames and that block stun isn't going to last that long, that's what tells you that Ryu's low roundhouse is minus 14 on block. Minus 14 on block. So it's really punishable. That's why so many things can punish it. And, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit more about these numbers when we come back and, you know, how you use these numbers and why you don't have to memorize these numbers in order to get better at this game. So we will be right back, guys, and stay tuned right after this break. All right, guys, welcome back to First Attack. Whoa, my awesome logo here. Of course, shout outs once again to Kugi. He's the one who created this for us here, this nice logo. Yeah, so seriously, shout outs to Paul Kugler of Broken Tier. I love his design work. Please check out his stuff at brokentier.com. You know, it's the least I can do for, you know, everything that he does for not only us, but for a lot of the community. If you guys have been watching Fighting Game TV with Filipino Champ and everybody, he made the overlays for those as well. So Kugi's always one of the hardest working guys here in our community. So seriously, shout outs to Paul Kugler once again of brokentier.com. Check his stuff out. Best fighting game shirts in the business. And I'm not saying that just because he made me logos and stuff like that. I literally mean it. I love his stuff. Genuinely, you know, from an artistic standpoint, I think his stuff is, you know, by far the most top-notch stuff that's out there. And all right, so back to frames here, and let's talk about this a little bit. I mentioned early on when this episode started that I feel like frame data is a little dangerous, that I'm a little worried about people becoming obsessed with frame data. And, you know, I did get a Twitter question from somebody. Let me see if I can find out who it was. Yeah, anyway, I got a Twitter question, and he basically asked, you know, how important is frame data? Should I study frame data? Should I understand frame data? So here's the thing. Players for the longest of time had no frame data. In fact, to this day, playing Super Turbo for 15 years, 20 years, I don't know how long we've been playing right now. If you block Bison's scissor kick, I still cannot tell you if that's plus or minus on block. I have no idea to this day, and it's just never mattered to me. I don't care whether it's plus or minus because I know how the game works. I know how everything works. So, you know, to be honest with you, you know, for example, if I block Honda's fierce headbutt in Super Street Fighter 4 and I'm Vega, I can low strong him back before he recovers. I don't need frame data to find, you know, to tell me that. I could just test it. I can go into training mode, tell my friend to be like, hey, headbutt me all day. I'm going to block and see if I can punish you. And if I hit you with low strong, I'm like, okay, I can punish you. That was our frame data a long time ago. Literally, it was just try it, and if it works, it works. In CVS2, we just tried low jab, low forward fireball with Ryu. Hey, look, it comboed. I didn't need frame data to tell me that. I just tried it, right? So this is, it's an instinct thing. I see someone on the chat mention the word instinct, and that's very important. Shogundu, thank you for mentioning that. It is an instinct thing, and it's something that you play and just kind of start to understand after a while. What frame data turns out to be is just, it tells you exactly what can or cannot be done mathematically. So in other words, there are such things as one frame punishes. For example, Balrog's jab rush. When he jab rushes you and you block that, he's -3. So too bad this isn't 3D, because that would be really cool if this was 3D. But if you block it, he's -3. So you could actually spend an entire day blocking Balrog's jab rush punch and trying to punish it with the 3-frame move and fail. The only thing frame data tells you is that you should be able to do it, because you'll see 3-frame startup -3 and I did all the math. I understand. That's what frame data is for, is it tells you what should or should not work. Now, there are a lot of players out there that require this. There are players who are very scientific out there. So, for example, I like to mention actual players because, it's better to show you examples of this. Edma, probably the most scientific player that I know, studies frames like you can't imagine, and he has it all down to a science. He's always sitting there like, okay, I know, this is plus this, so I know I could punish this. That means, okay, so off of a throw, I'm in this situation, the dash is 12 frames, so if I dash forward and then I jump, my jump is 30 some frames. When I land, I'm plus this, and he's the science player. And this is how Ed actually comes up with a lot of his tactics, is he literally sits there and calculates it out. But at the same time, you don't even really necessarily need to do that. You do not have to go all crazy like that. So watch. I'm gonna show you Edma's magical. This is how you calculate if you have frame advantage or not frame advantage technique, and you're gonna kind of laugh at how simple this is. So here we have this situation here. One of the things is, let's find out if Ryu's low strong is positive on block. We already know it is, but let's just test it right now. Oops. So if I, crouching medium punch, not crouching strong, crouching medium punch. So Ryu is going to do crouching medium punch here, boom, like this. And I'm going to block it. Now, what's an easy way to tell? Actually, the easiest way to tell, I'm going to change characters really quick. And I'm going to pick the same character. I'm going to do Ryu versus Ryu. I really should be in training mode for this, but whatever. So here we go. We have Ryu versus Ryu here. What's a really simple way to calculate frame advantage? Let's think about this for a second here. If Ryu is +2 on block, on low strong, but let's say we didn't know that, I'm going to do low strong, and then what I'm going to do is immediately hold up on both controllers. Oh god, I'm not going to be able to do this with 2 hands. Okay. Yeah, actually, David, can you help me real quick? So just do low strong and then hold up, straight up, immediately. Oops, okay, I'm going to have to hold up here. Okay, just keep holding up. Can you see it? Can you see Ryu landing ever so slightly before second player Ryu? That tells me that low strong has frame advantage because that first Ryu jumped first. So now watch, do low forward and do the same thing. Whoops. Hey, look at that. Player 2 is jumping before player 1. That means low forward has frame disadvantage. This is actually something that Enma taught me, which is really cool. Man, I'm getting beat up here. But it's just a really cool... See, this is what I mean. You don't necessarily need frame data. I don't care necessarily if it's minus whatever. I just know that if my low forward gets blocked, I'm at a frame disadvantage. And this is actually bad for me. This is... Anytime you're in a frame disadvantage, it's a bad thing. And this kind of ties into a question I got on Twitter that I really liked. I really like this question, so I want to answer this question right here, right now. Murphy D asked me the question, can you talk about follow-ups? Like when you do Cammy standing hard kick, how do you follow up on that? And to be honest with you, it's almost impossible to say because it all depends on the move. If I'm Ryu and I do a low strong here, low crouching medium punch. If I do a low medium punch here, I have frame advantage. So the way to follow up on that is to take advantage of that. I can start, approaching. But if I'm going to do low forward with Ryu, I'm not going to try to press my luck here because my opponent is actually... He recovers faster than I do. He may not be able to punish me, but he may have 1 or 2 frames before I can act, which means... My low strong, if he blocks it, that advantage that I gain in that situation, if he blocks my low forward, he has that advantage. So it really depends on the different moves that you have, on whether or not, on how you want to follow it up. If you have a move that has really, really horrible recovery like that low fierce there, your follow-up is most likely going to be block. If you hit your opponent with this move and don't cancel it, you would better block. And that's all you are going to do because you are at such a delay that you are in so much trouble. Now, there are certain situations where you could use that to your advantage and, uppercut in that situation because the opponent thinking to himself, he's delayed. Actually, a perfect example of that is from Ryan Hunter's analysis of the Devastation video between Latif and Justin Wong. Please watch that if you can. It is a great episode. I love watching that episode. He talked about key moments, and one of the key moments was after Rufus did low roundhouse, and Latif blocked it. Rufus is in delay there. He is actually minus, and so what Latif would always do is counter with the medium punch thunder knuckle every time because he had the advantage. Wasn't fast enough to punish, but he was in the frame advantage, so Justin blocked it a lot. Towards the end, Justin figured it out, and so he used that to bait it out with an EX Messiah kick to beat it. He had recognized Latif was doing that every single time. So again, please check that video out. I'm sure Ryan Hunter has it somewhere on YouTube. And Ryan, if you get wind of this, please tweet me it so I can retweet it to other people so they can watch it. Again, fantastic episode. Really, really amazing match analysis done by Ryan Hunter there for optionselect.com. So good stuff there. And so, but yeah, so that's kind of, knowing whether you're at an advantage, at a disadvantage. Bison's short scissor kick is 0 on block. So they're even, so you're kind of always in this even reset situation. Those kind of concepts are going to be what determines what your follow-up is. And that's kind of where the advantage of frame data is. You could sit here and, I'm going to do low forward and block and hold jump on both characters to find out. You can do all that work, or you can go to a web page like Shoryuken, go to their wiki, check the frame data, and get your answers right away. That is what frame data does. All it tells you is what works and what the situation is. Don't memorize the numbers. If you are playing against a character like Honda, just know that if he fierce headbutts you, you can punish it with A, B, or C based off of your frame data. This move has 8 frame startup, and I know it reaches far enough, and Honda's headbutt has, whatever amount of frames of delay, so I know my 8 frame startup move can hit it. That's all it is. Once you figure that out, you don't need to know the numbers anymore. You just know when you fight Honda, punish him with this move. But frame data will be the easiest way to tell you what moves can punish him. That's where frame data is. It's the rules. It tells you, it's like 2 steps for traveling, right? But then when you watch people play, they do crazy spin moves. They have all these like little bunny hops and stuff like that. It's all over the place, and they know that the rule is 2 steps before they have to shoot the ball. But what they do with those 2 steps is completely different and crazy. So that's kind of how you want to treat frame data. You know that this move is -3, so you'll know kind of what to understand to do. And I know a lot of people on the stream out there are clamoring for more information on frame traps, because frame traps falls all under this. But seriously, frame traps is all gonna, I can spend one whole episode on frame traps, and it's a super complicated concept. So I want to dedicate the proper time to it. So I apologize that I do not go into frame traps today. We will go into that in a little bit on hopefully a very near future episode. So when I come back after this break, I'm going to go through some of the questions from the Ask jchensor tweets there. Whoa, whoops, sorry guys, I have destroyed myself here. But trying to learn my new technology here. Sorry guys. But when we come back, I will go through some of those questions. So I'll be right back in just a little bit. Oh, shoot. How much have people missed here? Sorry about that. Okay, I guess I'm going to start all over again. Sorry about that, guys. I am going to... okay, I'm going to start this question all over again because I don't think anybody heard me. All right. So the first question that I wanted to answer here, and apologies about that, guys. The first question that people that I want to answer here from Ben Feingersh. There's a lot of questions here today. I'm not going to be able to get to them all. And so I apologize about that if I don't get to your question. And I also apologize if I butcher your name, like Ben Feingersh here. But he asks, what is your approach with new games? How do you identify good characters, strategies, recognize flaw testing methods? That must have been awesome watching me punch this guy in pure silence. Everyone's probably wondering, like, what the heck is he doing? He's like, oh. But, you know, okay, so the question, of course, is what is your approach with new games? How do you identify good strategies and stuff? And, you know, my first trolling kind of answer was wait till everybody else figures it out and copy them, you know. And it's a trolling answer because it really is the lazy man's way of playing Street Fighter. You really got to... it's an attitude that a lot of old school players hate because we've spent so much time discovering all these techniques and methods. And now today's players, a lot of the times, they sit back and they wait for the experts to discover things. And, you know, there's definitely a place for that, to go to forums, go and talk to other people and have them educate you. But at the same time, you don't want to do that. You want to take your time to figure things out. But the question is, when you go to a new game, how do you actually figure this out? So what I was talking about is you use your knowledge from other games. Because all these games are all these concepts that I've been talking about, especially like this hit stun, block stun stuff, it's universal. It applies to pretty much every fighting game. And, you know, of course, there's going to be exceptions to this. I brought up Killer Instinct when I was quiet. That game has no block stun at all, whatsoever. None. As soon as you block a move, you can cancel an attack. And that's what made that a fundamentally flawed fighting game. And, you know, there's going to be exceptions to these rules. But for the most part, block stun and hit stun are a known concept in fighting games. So let's say I don't know anything about King of Fighters and I'm walking into King of Fighters. Remember earlier on in this episode, I talked about the most obvious example of frame advantage is when you block a jump attack and Ryu landed and he had all this frame advantage while Cammy was still stuck in block, right? So that's a super advantageous situation. That's why jumps, you don't want to let people jump at you, because when they jump at you, you're put into a horrible position. But knowing that, and I'm going into King of Fighters, and I discover these hyper hops. They are really low to the ground, and they're jump attacks. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, jump attacks, when I land them in Street Fighter, give me all this frame advantage. And here's this hyper hop that I don't have to wait till I go all the way up into the sky. I can just kind of do this low jump that goes really far. And if I make them block this, wow, what kind of frame this hyper hop thing is amazing. And so immediately I'm going to start going crazy with hyper hops, and because this just looks really good. And, you know, the interesting part is I can use that same knowledge on the defensive end. If I'm playing against someone and I think to myself, you know what, I thought hyper hops were really good. So you know what, my opponent probably thinks hyper hops are really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out a lot of quick moves that cover this space right here. So I'm going to throw out lots of jabs. I'm going to throw out lots of jabs. I'm going to throw out lots of kicks that kind of hit diagonally like this, because hyper hops don't go high enough. So if they try to hyper hop me, they're going to run into my attack, and they're not going to avoid it. So already I've developed strategies for a fighting game that I don't play based off of knowledge that I got from other fighting games. And, you know, this can be a way to approach it. You can try stuff. And then, you know, the best way to really figure out if your tactics are good or not, are just try them. Just go online, go play someone, try them out. If they don't work, then they don't work. I've come up with plenty of awesome tactics in Marvel, and then I go play in a real match and I can't land a single one of them. So, you know, obviously when you transition from a game like Street Fighter to Marvel, it's very, very hard to make that kind of transition using an old game to go to a new game. And obviously I'm out of time here, and I only answered one question I want to answer one more because I really like this question from Fabricio. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. Fabricio 4P. That's all I'm going to say because I'm going to kill your last name, and I apologize about that. And he asked the question, what's the difference between having a game plan and knowing a matchup? I really like that question because, you know, people talk about, oh, I know how to fight this person, or you have to come up with a game plan. The difference between knowing a matchup and having a game plan is that knowing a matchup will help you create your game plan. If you know how to fight another opponent, for example, if I'm Ryu and I'm fighting against a character that has 7,000 ways through a fireball, I'm not going to base my game plan around throwing fireballs. And then all of a sudden I switch over to Honda, and Honda doesn't have a lot of ways through fireballs, so I'm going to throw a lot of fireballs. So you can see how the matchup knowledge is what helped you develop the game plan. And that's the way it works. That's the biggest difference between a game plan and matchup knowledge. Matchup knowledge is just like frame data, it's knowledge. Anything that's knowledge will help you in your game plan. Game plan is not knowledge. Game plan is how you implement your knowledge. So I really like that question. Thank you, Fabricio, for that one. And I have all sorts of questions here. I'm not going to get to them. A lot of them are execution-based questions. And like, how do I do basic combos and stuff like that? And I wanted to talk about that this week. I wasn't going to be able to until I covered frames, because to do lots of combos, there's a concept that you have to understand with active frames and such like that. So I had to do this episode first. Next week, hopefully, I'll be able to get into a lot more on execution. I want to talk about how to do basic combos, how to do FADCs and such like that. So thank you, everybody, again, for tuning in to First Attack, guys. Thank you again for watching. And shout outs to Kugi one more time because of this really awesome logo here. Yeah, awesome logo. And stick around, guys, because coming right up after this will be Level 3 Focus with Ultra David. So we will be right back.